What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Ben on Sports. And today, I finally have something that's not NASCAR, not the NFL. In celebration of the baseball season starting, I am doing a baseball 2026 preview prediction for the MLB. It's not going to be like last year. I'm going to try and make it a lot shorter rather than two 1.5 hour episodes. Hopefully, this episode can come in less than an hour. That is the goal. But I figured opening day is such a special time. It's one of my favorite sports days of the year. And this year we have March Madness going on with it. So I figured I should give you guys an MLB episode. Post editing note, I've had lots of technical difficulties getting this episode uploaded. And I apologize for it coming out so close to the start of baseball season. Actually, on Thursday, it was supposed to come out no later than Wednesday afternoon, and I unfortunately have had technical difficulties. Just wanted to throw that post-editing note in there. Apologize for being late, and I try not to do videos on back-to-back days, and obviously NASCAR comes on Friday, but sometimes technology doesn't want to cooperate. Let's get back to the video. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with some big storylines coming out of the offseason. Is there an impending strike over the salary cap? It sounds like a lot of the owners are pushing for it. The players very obviously do not want it. This could be the last season we have baseball for 2 years. You know, there's a lot of talk that the sides, that labor and management are very far off, and that could lead to a strike. I hope there's not a strike. Everybody hopes there's not a strike. Let's not argue about silly stuff. Maybe the MLB does need a salary cap. Maybe it doesn't. I will say this. I do think there's some structural changes needed, but if you look at a lot of the salary cap sports, I would argue that there's been less parity in a lot of the salary cap sports than there has been in baseball where there is no salary cap. But I do think there needs to be a way to have more equal free agent process and make it. I think we need to encourage players that become stars, because right now players stay for at teams for 6 years, and if they become superstars, that team has an attachment and that team should want to keep them. But what if a small market team is getting priced out of that? I think we should encourage that. However, I'm also going to come at the small market teams like the Pirates and the Marlins. Y'all need to spend money. It's also not right that they spend less than $100 million every year. So there needs to be some type of compromise for this, where labor and ownership can agree, whether it's on a salary cap or on some different setup. But I do think there's an impending strike because it sounds like both parties are very far off. The new ABS system is here this season. It was tested in the minors last year. It was being used in spring training, and I hope it satisfies everybody. In reality, umpires are usually good at their job. I do think they lack consistency, which is always my biggest thing with officiating in any sport. Consistency is more important to me than being right 100% of the time. But hopefully the ABS system helps teams and helps players and even helps umpires this season prove that they get most of the calls right. It does get tiresome seeing bad strike calls or bad ball calls when it's late in a close game and it clearly affects the game. Now teams are also going to have to be smart and make sure they have challenges remaining at that point, because you could lose your challenges. At what point it would be your own fault. But I'm excited for the ABS system, and it looks like it's not going to add too much time to the game. World Baseball Classic was this offseason, and to me it seemed like it was another huge hit. Venezuela beating U.S. in the final game after a top of the ninth rally. Huge hit. It definitely seems as if a lot of the countries from all over the world love the WBC, love participating, and it brings the baseball world together. And I personally love it. I do wish sometimes it was at a different location, but baseball season is so long, it would be hard to have it in a different time. But I do want to see the best of the best coming out for each country. And there was some big name players not playing in this one, but it was still fun nonetheless. Another big storyline: can the Dodgers continue their reign of terror? Can they win their third straight title, something that hasn't been done in over 20 years? And can they win their fourth title of the 2020s? Obviously, they won in 2020. They won 2024. They won 2025. Can they go their third straight in 2026? Many contenders have new looking rosters. Even the Dodgers have a couple big names they signed. The Mets look completely different. The Blue Jays are a little bit different this year. I think the Yankees largely stayed the same, but they should be healthier this season. The Braves, injury, but they look the same. A lot of these teams that the last couple of years have been consistently at the top, I think, look the same. The Tigers do. But I'm interested to see how some of these new rosters that are put together compete. I would argue the Red Sox have a somewhat new roster. The Orioles have a pretty new looking roster. And I'm interested to see which rosters are better, the ones that have largely stayed the same or the ones that are new and brought in new players. It's always a fun thing to watch. That is one storyline, another storyline for me this year. I kind of already talked about this. Should there be a salary floor? Yes. If baseball ever goes to a salary cap system, which I think the players are going to be able to defeat any talks of a salary cap eventually, by the way. But if there ever was a salary cap system, there also needs to be a salary floor, because, as I already said, it's ridiculous that there's some teams that aren't even spending $100 million. And really, every team should be able to spend significantly into the $100 million bracket. Salary floor is just as important as a salary cap in baseball. And yeah, I think it's hard to get one without the other. And I don't know if we'll ever get either, because management owners aren't going to want to be forced to spend a certain amount of money, and players don't want to have a cap that's going to affect their earnings. So, but I can see that both could be very reasonable and necessary. Young players looking to make their name for themselves all over the league, whether it's position players or pitching players. There's a lot of rookies or second-year players with a lot of hype this season that are looking to prove they are stars. Obviously, not everybody pans out, but man, it could be an exciting year for the young guys. You look around the league. I know he didn't make the opening day roster, but somebody like Connor Griffin or Samuel Basallo for the Orioles. I like Chase DeLauder out in Cleveland. I think Travis Bazzana comes up not too long. Gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting the guy's name in Detroit. That's one of the top prospects in the MLB. He made the opening roster, or the opening day roster. You have Bubba Chandler, right? There's guys all over the league that in both leagues, in the American League and the National League. And I think this Rookie of the Year race is going to be incredibly fun and exciting the entire year. And then there's a lot of issues with local media rights deals, in my opinion. A lot of teams are using the MLB TV. If you pay for MLB TV, I don't necessarily love that solution. It's better than nothing, but there needs to be local media right deals with local networks so every team can have easy access, I guess. And I understand, and blackouts are a thing, and all of this, but these local media rights deals need to be figured out. Every team should be featured on a local market that everybody can have access to. Otherwise, it's going to make being a fan and watching your team's games that much more difficult, in my opinion. Let's figure out these media rights deals. Here's some of the biggest moves of the offseason. I put 20. I was going to put 10, but then I felt bad for leaving some of the big trades off. I don't know. There was a heck of a lot of movement in the offseason, both in the trade market and in the free agency market. And I'm going to try and quickly recap some of these, if not at least mention all 20 of these. The biggest move of the offseason that feels like the bad guy getting even stronger in a superhero movie. It's the rich getting richer, and it's holding the little guy down in some ways, right? The Dodgers signing Kyle Tucker to a 4-year deal, only going to make the back-to-back world champs that much better in the Dodgers. Kyle Tucker, incredible player, getting a boatload of money. Obviously, there's that whole deferral discussion that I'm not going to have right now. But Kyle Tucker signed to a 4-year deal, biggest move of the offseason, and it goes to the Dodgers. Also for the Dodgers, my 11th ranked move, Edwin Diaz. They signed Edwin Diaz, take them from one of their biggest competitors in the National League, the Mets, and signed Edwin Diaz to a 3-year deal. It was a bullpen that already had a pretty good back end, and now they have a bona fide stud at closer. Dodgers get the best offensive player, and they get the best closer on the market, making that team even better as they gear up for a three-peat. The Blue Jays made the second biggest signing, in my opinion, with Dylan Cease getting signed to a 7-year deal in Toronto. That starting rotation, it's a little bit banged up, but you got to think it should be pretty good for the Blue Jays. And I think that the Blue Jays, I'll talk about a little bit later, are going to need that starting rotation to be elite. But the Blue Jays said, we went to the World Series last year. Let's continue this arms race and sign Dylan Cease. And to that point, they also made another big signing. They missed on Kyle Tucker. They didn't re-sign Bo Bichette, things like that. But they did make a signing that I do think is a little bit of a risk in signing Kazuma Okamoto to a 4-year deal from Japan, to try and help their infield, particularly their infield offense. And I'll be interested to see. That was my 16th ranked move, by the way. I'll be interested to see how some of these Japanese batters come over. I think Japanese pitchers have a much higher hit rate than Japanese batters, at least in recent history. Sorry, I know that there's some great late 90s and 2000s players that would like to disagree with me, but in modern MLB history, the pitchers have been more consistent than the hitters have been, and I'm interested to watch Kazuma Okamoto and see how he fits into this Blue Jays rotation. The Mets. Let's talk about the Mets. They have my third ranked move. They traded for Freddie Peralta. They have a stud at the top of the rotation, and I'm a little bit worried about the back end of their rotation, but they have some young guys that can compete for it and be good. But the Mets did very good to get a true stud without having to hit the free agent market, something that they are not afraid to do. But the Mets get Freddie Peralta, an elite front end starter, a true number one that you can hand the ball off every 5 days to and feel confident you'll have a chance to win. And in addition to this, they go out and they get Bo Bichette from the Toronto Blue Jays, a high on-base guy, signed him to a 3-year high AAV deal. That was my eighth ranked move. Met signing Bo Bichette. My third is them trading for Freddie Peralta. And then don't forget, they went ahead and traded Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Semien, shoring up their infield, getting rid of an aging Brandon Nimmo, although Marcus Semien is also aging. But maybe fresh starts help both of those players. And the Mets all of a sudden have a pretty new-looking roster. They let Pete Alonso go as well, but they let Edwin Diaz go. But they brought in some other players, and this Mets team is looking interesting with all of the moves they have made. An unexpected team to sign a big deal with new ownership that I guess is not afraid to spend money. My fourth biggest move of the offseason, the Orioles signing Pete Alonso to a 5-year massive contract. Orioles have not been in the habit of doing this kind of stuff. New ownership, I guess it means it's time. Orioles signing Pete Alonso to a 5-year deal. That's my fourth ranked move. But the Orioles weren't done yet. They still have multiple other moves on here. As in number 12, they swap Grayson Rodriguez, one of the best pitching prospects Baltimore has seen in a while, but very injury prone. And they're like, you know what? Even though we need starting pitching, this move is going to be confusing because starting pitching is what they needed. But they go and trade their best pitching prospect to Taylor Ward in a straight-up trade. But Taylor Ward, a right-handed hitter, something the Orioles, even after signing Pete Alonso, although the trade happened before they signed Pete Alonso, didn't have a lot of. And he hit 36 home runs as a right-handed batter last year. Taylor Ward, Grayson Rodriguez swap. And now the Orioles have two really good right-handed hitters to help with their issues against lefties. And they still weren't done. They went out. Felix Bautista is a fun, great closer, but he's been hurt for them so much the last 3 years. They go out and take a chance on a 3-year deal for Ryan Helsley, or a 2-year deal for Ryan Helsley. I don't know why it says 3. I think it's just a 2, if I remember correctly. Hoping Ryan Helsley can find the form he had with the Cardinals and be that dominant closer, helping with a bullpen that is still pretty weak, but that should shore up the back end. And just when you think they're done, right? They lost out on Framber Valdez. They lost out on Ronher Suarez. They lost out on all these big names. The Orioles go out and trade for a former top pitching prospect in the entire MLB in Shane Baz, giving up a huge package of prospects. Orioles going all in. That was my 20th ranked move, going to get Shane Baz. Orioles on this list 4 times out of 20, really trying to go after it after a dismal season last season. And then the Tigers had a good year last year, have one of the 2 best pitchers in baseball as the reigning Cy Young, Tariq Skubal. And they're in here with the 5th best offseason move, signing, in my opinion, the best free agent starting pitcher on the market, Framber Valdez, to a 3-year deal, adding it to an already really good rotation. Can their offense give them enough is my question. The Tigers, though, came out of nowhere, signing Valdez to a 3-year deal. And Phillies, they didn't sign anybody new, but they re-signed Kyle Schwarber to a 5-year deal, and that was massive. I was worried about the Phillies and being, if they lost Kyle Schwarber, would they be able to replicate it? Would there be somebody they could fit in there? And I don't think there was a lot of answers. So the Phillies do a really good job to retain the talent they have. Kyle Schwarber returned on a 5-year deal after a massive year last season. Cubs look a little bit different too this season after Kyle Tucker. They trade for Kyle Tucker for a year. Kyle Tucker then goes to the Dodgers. But the Cubs still were trying to find a way to be competitive. The Cubs go and sign Alex Bregman to a 5-year deal away from the Boston Red Sox, something that was very unexpected, to help try and replace that offense. I don't think Bregman touches Kyle Tucker, but Bregman is still a very good defender and a solid offensive player. And one thing that's not on this list that I want to mention, the Cubs did, they also went out and traded for a pretty good arm in Edward Cabrera. That's going to help their rotation. I think the Cubs, I don't know if they're going to be quite as good as last year, but I also think that they have some young guys that'll take a step forward, and that will help as well. The Cubs doing a nice job. I already talked about move number 8. Move number 9, the Red Sox signing Ronher Suarez to a 5-year deal. It looked like the Orioles were going to get him. The Orioles had that offer out there. I think a lot of the reports said that the Orioles had the second best offer, but the Red Sox come in last minute and say, we're going to sign Ronher Suarez to a 5-year deal, and we're going to have a really good rotation, and a really good rotation do they have, especially when you combine it with number 19 on my list, which is trading for Sonny Gray. Now and you add in the fact they already had Garrett Crochet and a litany of young arms that have shown so much promise. This Red Sox rotation looks really, really good on paper. And Red Sox had an interesting offseason. They don't have Alex Bregman, but maybe some of their young players can fill the shoes. And then the last move I have in the top 10, Yankees re-signing Cody Bellinger to a 5-year deal. Yankees didn't do a whole lot. The biggest thing they did was just re-signing Cody Bellinger. They didn't do a whole lot outside of that, but the lineup should still be pretty good. I don't have much else to say, but Yankees did a good job keeping the middle of that lineup intact. You still have Aaron Judge. You still have a guy that I personally like in Austin Wells. I don't know if Trent Grisham's going to repeat what he did last year, but this is not the time to talk about that. Yankees keeping their big bats from last season together. Good job keeping Cody Bellinger, because I think the Yankees could have been in trouble had they not re-signed him. Some other ones I want to mention that haven't yet. The White Sox signing the biggest Japanese bat in free agency, Munetaka Murakami, to a 2-year deal. A lot of talks about him, about his strikeouts and him potentially having trouble making contact. But if he does make contact, the power is there. The Rangers, I mentioned they made a trade with the Mets. They also made a trade with the Nationals for Mackenzie Gore, one of the biggest trade candidates at the starting pitching position. Rangers rotation should be looking pretty good with that addition. And then the Astros, move number 18, they're only mentioned on here, signing another Japanese free agent, this time a pitcher, and Tatsuya Imai to a 3-year deal. And I'm very interested to see what the Astros look like in general, particularly their rotation. Moving on. Buying and selling. I'm going to go through this quick. I have 8 things I'm buying this season. It could be teams. It could be storylines. It could be a player. Who knows? And I have 8 things that I'm selling. It could be position groups. That's the other thing I think about. I am buying the AL East being the toughest division in baseball. I think there's a real chance all five of those teams get at least 80 wins. I think that could hurt their record and potentially seeding. But I think this AL East is in an arms race. Most of those teams are. And the Rays always find a way to never actually bottom out. And the Rays have some nice pieces as well. AL East, I'm buying them being the toughest division in baseball. And I don't think it'll be particularly close. Kyle Tucker helping the Dodgers stay fresh. I think this is a big thing. The Dodgers have been playing a lot of baseball. They've won back-to-back titles deep into the postseason. Fatigue is a natural thing, especially when you think the Dodgers, a lot of their core is getting older. So what do? They go in and bring out a younger MVP candidate type of player in Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker, incredible player. He's going to help refresh this team, I think. I'm going to bring the age down. Somebody who has been playing as much postseason baseball as of late. Not that he hasn't been in the postseason, he has, but I just think he's younger. I don't think he's going to be as, or I don't think, because he hasn't played as much baseball, hasn't been playing into essentially November. I think he'll also be more rested, and I think that's going to help the Dodgers stay fresh. I think there's quite a few up and coming teams that will have increasing win totals that will push for wild card spots. The Pirates, although don't get too high on the Pirates, I'm worried that they might go to overhyped, but I definitely think they're at least taking a step forward. I think the Athletics are going to surprise some people this year and make a run at the wild card. I think the White Sox will be much improved. I don't know if they're going to be good enough to make the wild card yet. And I still think there's a chance at the trade deadline they sell a lot of the pieces they have, at least the ones that don't help them in the future. But up and coming teams increasing win totals. I think the Braves are going to rebound. Rough season for Atlanta last year. Didn't perform well, losing record, had some injuries. I think they rebound into being one of the league's best teams again. They have a great offense. Their rotation should be good. They're a little bit banged up, but I think they'll be okay by May. I am buying a Braves rebound. I'm buying repeat MVPs. The last couple of seasons, it just felt like Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge are that much better. And how can you overcome them in the MVP race? Well, I'm buying that happening again this year. I think we could see dual repeat MVPs yet again. Number 6, I'm buying the Tigers rotation. I think this Tigers rotation has the potential to be the best in baseball, even with all the injuries they already have. A 1-2 punch of Skubal and Valdez, two elite lefties, two of the better lefties in the sport. You still have guys like Casey Mize and Jack Flaherty that I like. I think this Tigers rotation can be the best in baseball. Exciting Rookie of the Year races. I've already talked about that a little bit, but boy, I think these Rookie of the Year races are going to be exciting in both the American League and the National League. It's always fun to see young players explode onto the scene, and there's some huge potential for that this year. And the National League having a significantly worse bottom. I was looking at this. I think the National League has a really, really good top. I would argue the National League might have a better top than the American League. Like when you look at their top 3 teams and their ability to win the title, but the bottom of the National League is so much worse than the bottom of the American League. I mean, I could make an argument that almost the entire American League has a chance at least the wild card, except for maybe 2 or 3 teams. I can't make that same argument for the National League, and I think the National League better top, much worse bottom. I think the American League is much closer grouped together, and that should be interesting to watch at the trade deadline. Things I'm selling, the Mariners core repeating. There's a lot of things I like the Mariners have done. I don't know if I think they're the best team in the American League. I'm still a little bit worried about their offense. I know that they made a trade for Brendan Donovan, who's a very good player, but I'm a little bit worried about Julio Rodriguez, but I'm especially worried about Cal Riley. I don't think what they did last year is repeatable. I don't think their core is going to provide as much offense this year. And if they don't get the offensive production they're expecting from some of the non-superstar players they have, they will struggle offensively this season. Now, I think even if they drop off a little bit, they can still be very good, and I still think the other pieces can help them be good. I'm just saying I don't think Cal Riley and Julio Rodriguez have quite the same seasons, especially Cal Riley, as they did last year, and that can hurt the Mariners' offense. You know who else I don't think is going to have as good of an offense as they did last year? The Toronto Blue Jays. I think they relied on a lot of guys having the best seasons of their career that have been journeymen or, just guys that aren't predicted to do very well, and it's a nice story. That's why the Blue Jays were so loved. But they lost Bo Bichette, very good average guy, hits you some home runs, can steal you some bases, gets on base. But they still have Vladimir Guerrero. I'll be interested to see in George Springer. He's won the World Series. But in Toronto, he hasn't been the same player he was in Houston. Last year was his best year in Toronto. Can he replicate it? That will be huge for the Blue Jays if he can. But outside of those two guys, I'm not sold on any of their offensive guys doing what they did last season. Good thing the Blue Jays have the pitching, because I don't know if they have the offense. I don't buy this Red Sox rotation being the best in baseball. On paper, it should be very good, and I still think that it should be a top 10, maybe top 5 rotation. Garrett Crochet, absolute stud, should be in the Cy Young race. But Sonny Gray and Ronher Suarez are both getting up there in age. The numbers for Suarez have been velocity-wise have been getting worse and worse. Sonny Gray to me is either pretty good or not very good. And I don't know. I'm not personally sold on this Red Sox rotation yet. I can see why there's optimism, and that's fair. I personally don't quite see it yet. I don't think the Mets' new position players I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year offensively. They still have Soto and Lindor, but I'm worried behind them what they have. It could just be that Simeon's done. I don't hate the trade with the White Sox, but what is Luis Robert really going to do? I don't know. I'm a little. I don't think the Mets are bad this year. I don't know if I buy them offensively. There's a lot of teams I'm worried about their offense, so they better have good pitching. I don't think the Brewers continue their run. The last 2 years, they've kind of been a Cinderella of sorts, coming out of nowhere to win the division and be really good. I don't know if that happens again this year. They have a really good manager, maybe the best manager in baseball, that keeps them competitive. I still think they can fight for a wild card, but I don't know if this insane run is going to continue for them, where they trade their best player and are still really, really good the next season. I don't buy that the Cubs run away with the NL Central. I don't think they're as bulletproof as they were last year. And even last year, they slowed down in the second half. There's some big up-and-coming teams in their division. I don't buy that the Cubs run away and win their division easily. Dodgers three-peat, I don't think is a foregone conclusion. Again, I think they're tired. They've played a lot of baseball. Some of their core is aging, and there's some other teams around them that are getting pretty good as well that can either match the pitching or match the hitting depth, and the trade deadline is only going to bolster that. And my last one, I am selling that the impending lockout doesn't affect trades and contracts. Look, they have a better read as players and owners and general managers than the fans do on what's actually going to happen. But if there's a world where there is a salary cap, or there's a world where there's a salary floor, or any of these things or changes that could be coming, they're going to know about it before the fans. And I think that can affect how much money players look for in contracts. They might be willing to sign longer term deals, or it could mean the inverse. But I think the financial side of it, I do not think that the impending lockout won't affect that. And I think that's why you saw somebody like Pete Crow Armstrong go ahead and sign a deal when he could probably get a lot more money if he waited a year or two. Now that I've talked about the offseason and some of the things that I didn't like, talking about some of these issues, maybe some of them aren't issues really. I'm just talking about the potential lockout. But now that I've talked about some of these things, I'm going to get into what everybody's here for: the standings, my predictions, all of that stuff, and then maybe even a postseason bracket. I'm going to start with the American League, the best division in baseball, the American League East. I'm not going to read off all these numbers, because that would just be reading a boatload of numbers, where if you're just listening, it's going to be hard to keep track of. But if you want to, you can also see it here. I did what I did last year. I have Fangraphs projections, I have Pacoda's predictions, and then I have my predictions, and I average them all together, and I'll be giving you the averages of all of that, and then I'll make a postseason bracket based off the averages. I'll talk a little bit about these teams, the division races, and things of the sort. So the American League East: Yankees, Red Sox, Orioles, Blue Jays, and Rays. After doing the math of the average, all of these teams were at least at 500, if not above. Again, they call it the toughest division in baseball for a reason. It's like an arms race with these teams. especially the Red Sox, Orioles, and Blue Jays this offseason. However, none of those three are the teams projected to win. Fangraphs and Pacoda both have the same team winning. I did not have this team winning, but the average score, the Yankees favorite to win with a record of 87.67 and 74.33. The Red Sox just behind them at 87.33 and 74.67. I think they're the two favorites, but I don't think the Orioles and Blue Jays are far behind. I wouldn't be shocked to see those four teams in any order. The Yankees, I'm worried that their pitching staff is going to, when it gets healthy and it starts with Garrett Cole and Max Fried, that might be the best 1-2 punch in baseball. They have some great guys all the way down that rotation. I'm worried about the others. Judge is there. Chisholm is there. Bellinger is there, but I'm worried about the production they're going to get from the infield outside of Jazz Chisholm. I'm worried about the production from the so-called others with the Yankees. I think their pitching should be fine. Their bullpen should be okay. What help do they get from the others? But that is still not the biggest question mark in this division. The Red Sox, on paper, that starting staff is really, really good. It should be interesting to see who has the best pitching staff in this division between the Yankees and the Red Sox. Maybe even the Blue Jays factor into that. But I am worried about some aging out of Sonny Gray and Ronher Suarez, just like I'm worried about this team offensively. Yes, they are expecting big seasons from Roman Anthony, but they don't have Alex Bregman anymore. Jaron Duran should still be good. I don't know, guys. They did make the trade for Contreras. I still have my reservations about a consistent Red Sox offense this year. I don't think it'll be a top 2 or 3 offense. Definitely not a top 2 offense in the division. The strength of this Red Sox seems to me is going to be that pitching. But the average here has the Red Sox and Yankees super close at the top. The Orioles and Blue Jays. The Orioles are actually projected to be 83 and 79 by both Fangraphs and Pacoda. I think it's interesting when the two prediction methods agree. But the average for the Orioles record was 84 and 78, and for the Blue Jays, it was 83.67 and 78.33. So Yankees and Red Sox first and second, Orioles and Blue Jays third and fourth, but the averages are only separated by 5 games, and the Orioles and Blue Jays essentially have the same record, and the Red Sox and Yankees essentially have the same record. So a very close division race. The Orioles, I think, should have, assuming some of their players play to their capability, should rebound this year. I think they should have the best offense in the division. Obviously, Pete Alonso and Taylor Ward being right-handed hitters is going to help that lineup. Still very worried about that bullpen. The only arm I'm somewhat sure of is Helsley, and even he didn't finish the year well last year. That starting rotation hopefully is better for the Orioles. Hopefully they get health and consistency out of it, but it's probably the least reliable starting rotation in this division. It does have potential. The Blue Jays, I don't see their offense repeating what it did last year. I don't like this offense at all. The pitching staff should be good. You have Cease, you have Gossman, you have, maybe I can never say his name right, so forgive me, Blue Jays fans. The young gun, Yesavage, I can never say it. Yesavage, whatever it is. I'm so bad at pronouncing that name. I'm sorry. You've got to think he'll factor in. If the Blue Jays rotation stays healthy, they should be pretty good, but I don't trust their offense outside of Vladimir Guerrero and maybe George Springer. And then the Rays are just going to be the Rays. I expect a typical Tampa Bay Rays year. I don't think they have the star power to push for the division win. Maybe they push for a wild card. I have them finishing around 500, just like the prediction methods. Moving on to the Central, the Tigers are the favorite here. I think the Tigers... Listen, I'm never going to count the Guardians out, especially after the last 2 seasons being predicted to not be that good and then finishing at the top of the division. So I feel like it's wrong to have the Guardians as far down as some of the projections have them and where the average is. But the Tigers are definitely the favorite. Fangraphs and Pacoda both agree that they're going to be 84 and 78. I'm kind of surprised Pacoda has them that low. Fangraphs always has people close together. Historically, Fangraphs doesn't have a lot of extremes, both on the bad side or the good side. They're usually lumped closer together, and it rarely ends up being lumped that close together. And then Pacoda, you'll see a little bit more extremes, but not in this division. Everybody is close in this division on both predictions, except for the White Sox. The average for the Tigers was 85.33 and 76.67. The Royals are actually projected to be right there with the Tigers, but I have them at 83 and 79. I like the Royals pitching. I like Bobby Witt. I like Salvador Perez. I'm worried about the rest of the offense. Maikel Garcia is fine. I still think they need another stud position player with a great bat. The Twins, Fangraphs and Pacoda, are higher on than I am. It averaged out to 77.67 and 84.33. Again, the Twins started hot last year, finished bad. It's a very confusing offseason. I think the Twins are in limbo, and it's going to cost them some games. The Guardians, I'm higher on than the prediction method, and they do have one of the most underappreciated players in this era in Jose Ramirez. They still have Stephen Kwan. We'll see how long that lasts. The Guardians have question marks. They need more power. They need the young guys to come up and produce, but I still have them at 80 and 82, again, higher than the other two. I just feel like you can't count the Guardians out after the last two seasons. The average record for them is 77.33 and 84.67. And then the White Sox, Pacoda and Fangraphs both have them at 70 and 92. I have them at 72 and 90. The average there, 70.67 and 91.33. So a pretty good pickup in wins for the White Sox. I do think some of the guys they picked up that are going to help their team be good might be traded at the trade deadline. But I think this is going to be the first year the White Sox, since they've rebuilt, are going to start climbing back up the standings and getting more wins. American League West. The Mariners are the favorite to win the American League. Fangraphs has them tied with the Yankees in first. Pacoda has them running away with the American League at 95 wins, the only team over 90 wins in Pacoda, and no team over 90 wins in Fangraphs. That's kind of what I'm talking about with the extremes. I am worried about the Mariners offense. My bad there. I'm worried about the Mariners offense. I think they should have a little bit more help from their non-superstar players, and they're going to need it because I think both of their superstar players take steps back. Julio Rodriguez is an incredible player. He still, I don't think, has put it all together to reach his high potential. I don't know if Cal Riley will ever get close to replicating what he did last year. I still think he can be a solid power-hitting catcher, but I think the Mariners are going to need help from the others. Their pitching staff is going to be good. And after doing the math, they averaged out to 91 and 71, which would give them first place in the American League. The Astros are kind of interesting. They are projecting to be a wild card team competing for the wild card at 83 and 79. None of the predictions had them below 500. The Rangers got a little bit more love than the Astros from Fangraphs and Pacoda. I had them still over 500, but not quite as good as the Astros. But the average came out to the same record of 83 and 79. The Rangers, if they can't get it together this year, I think it might be time to blow it up. That's another thing I want to say. I loved the Rangers last year. At the beginning of the season, I picked them to make the World Series, but they have not been able to find that magic that they had when they won the 2023 World Series. They should have a good pitching staff, but they've gotten rid of some of the big name bats from that World Series run. Can the Rangers finally recover and get that magic and get back to the playoffs? If they don't, maybe it's a sign that the core isn't good enough. The Athletics, everybody has them flirting around 500, just below. The average was 78.67 and 83.33. I think the Athletics are on their way up. I don't think their pitching is good enough to make the playoffs, but that offense should be good. They're a fun, young, frisky team, and definitely on the rise. And then the Angels, stuck in purgatory, in my opinion. Never good enough to compete, but they also don't fully blow it up and just rebuild. So they're just kind of stuck in this right below 500 purgatory. This is one of the teams across the MLB that Fangraphs and Pacoda have separated the most, diverged the most. It's a total of 8 wins that they are separated by. I'm in between those two projections, and it averages out at 69.33 and 92.67. All right, let's move on to the National League. The National League East, man, the beast of the East in both divisions. The Braves, the Mets, and the Phillies is one of my favorite. It's like a three-way rivalry, and I absolutely love it. It's kind of like rock, paper, scissors. One team beats the other team, but they lose to the other team, and it's a whole thing over the last couple of years. These fans don't like each other. The teams don't like each other. I love the Braves, the Mets, and the Phillies, the three-way rivalry in this division, and they've all been good for quite a few years consecutively now. The Braves took a step back this year, but I like them to take a step forward, which is why they are winning the division with the average record of 89.67 and 72.33. The Mets at 88 and 74. One thing I will mention, Fangraphs and Pacoda had the Mets and the Braves. It gave them the same record. Fangraphs at 88 and 74, Pacoda at 89 and 73. But I had the Braves ahead of the Mets by a couple of games here, which is why the Braves average is 1.67 points higher than the Mets win total. I think the Mets are a good team. I think their offense is going to slip a little bit with all the offseason moves. I don't know if I like it as much. I don't think that I do. And for that reason, I think they're still a wild card team. I don't know if they can win this division if the Braves play up to potential. If the Braves don't play up to potential, then the Mets could be right there. The Phillies in all three predictions were firmly the third place team, and they averaged out at 85.77. The Marlins had a big year last year, took a big step forward. Then they also still got rid of some of their pieces. I still think the Marlins are rebuilding. I don't think they fall off too much, but I don't think they get that much better. Average record of 75.33 and 86.67. And then the Nationals, in my opinion, are going to be one of the worst teams in baseball. I think the projections show it out. Yes, they have some fun young pieces that maybe contribute, but overall, I don't think they're going to be that great. With an average record of 64.67 and 97.33. The top three dogs in this division should be very fun to watch, I will say. National League Central, maybe one of the biggest question marks. I think the Cubs are the favorites, and the Cubs should be okay. But there's three teams I think the Brewers have way outperformed what you look at. They are definitely a sum is greater than the parts roster. They've done a phenomenal job the last two seasons, but eventually, when you trade away your best pitcher in the offseason, eventually that has to catch up with you. Eventually, not spending tons of money has to catch up with you in the sum greater than your parts mentality. It rarely wins in the playoffs. It can do well in the regular season. It rarely wins in the playoffs. And I think the Brewers this year, while they're not going to be bad, aren't going to be as good as they have been using that style, which is why I think the Cubs are the favorites. I have the Cubs average at 87.33 and 74.67. The Brewers average in second at 82 and 80. Those have been the two consistent teams at the top of this division. Brewers hanging out around the wild card. Cubs kind of comfortably winning this division. Also would like to note a big separation here. Fangraphs only has the Cubs at 83 wins, barely winning this division. Pacoda likes them at 90, so that's another pretty big difference for a team that has playoff hopes. Then we get to two teams that I think are very young, fun, and interesting in the Pirates and Reds. Both, especially the Pirates, tried to upgrade their rosters to make it further into the playoffs, and in the Pirates' case, make it into the playoffs. I think that they're going to be better, and they're going to be hanging out around the wild card, hanging out around 500. But I don't know if either quite makes it. They both have pretty good pitching staffs, the Pirates even more so, but I like the Reds offense just a little bit more. But neither of these teams do anything if the guys that they're expecting to be good don't take a step forward, and some of their young prospects don't take a step forward. They're not going to make a run without those things happening, but they still have good pieces in place. Two teams that I think are going to be incredibly fun to watch. The Pirates, I do think, maybe starting to get a tad overrated as underdog candidate, if that makes sense, but they should be much improved. The average Pirates record was and 82. The Reds' average record was 78.67 and 83.33. I do think the Reds have a slightly higher ceiling if everything works out, but I do like the fact that the Pirates are trying to make free agent additions and even make a trade for Brandon Lowe, free agent additions in Asuna and Ryan O'Hearn, hopefully trying to bolster their offense, but I still think they might be lacking that true stud unless somebody like O'Neal Cruz comes along. And then last in this division, the Cardinals, they have one of the best prospects in baseball debuting opening day in J.J. Weatherholt. Unlike the Pirates not debuting Connor Griffin in this division. But the Cardinals are similar to the Angels. They haven't quite blown it all the way up, but they also know they're not competing. They've gotten rid of some of their older veteran players and gotten some young pieces in return. And I think that they just need to embrace the youth movement. The average Cardinals record, not bottoming out, but not great either, at 70.33 and 91.67. And for the last division, the National League West, both Fangraphs and Pacoda like the Dodgers to just absolutely run away, win this division by double digits. And maybe the Dodgers do. I think there's going to be at least one team that finds a way to stay close and keep the Dodgers honest. But I think they still win this division by a minimum of 6 to 7 games. And I can definitely see a world where they win it by 15, 16, 17, like some of the predictions stay. The Dodgers picking up Kyle Tucker, I think, is going to refresh them, as I said earlier, keep them feeling young. The Dodgers, if anybody's going to hit 100 wins, they have to be the favorite. Fangraphs has them winning the most games in the MLB at 95 and 67. Pacoda has them as the only team hitting 100 wins at 103 and 59. All of that is fair. Their average record came out to 98.67 and 63.33. The Padres are projected to be right around 500. They still have some star power, but outside of the star power, I don't think their supporting cast is as good as it has been, and I think that's where their drop in record comes from. They are still averaging to just over 500 at 81.33 and 80.67, and really, if you round it, it averages out to 500. And the Diamondbacks and Giants are following them right around that same mark as they are both 81 and 81. So my question for the National League West is, who can rise up out of this middle between the Padres, Diamondbacks, and Giants to win at least, try and win 85, 86 to be in contention for a wild card and at least try and keep the Dodgers honest? That is my question. I think the Diamondbacks can have a really good pitching staff. They have Corbin Carroll. What else can they do offensively? And then the Giants, I don't really buy. My personal belief is that they are the least likely out of those three teams to rise up and challenge. Yeah, they have some good pitchers. They have a couple of good offensive players. I just don't see it in San Francisco this season. And then the Rockies in the running for one of the worst teams in baseball. My personal record is not that they will be the worst team in baseball. I think they have a couple of fun young prospects, a couple of pieces that'll help them win just enough games where they can get right around the 60 win mark, and the average record for them being 61.67 and 100.33. Now last thing for this episode, I'm going to run the playoffs. I'm using the average records. I'm not using my predictions or Fangraphs or Pacoda. It's the average of the three predictions that will be determining the playoff seeding. Obviously, as the season goes, I reserve the right to change my personal opinion in my mind. But in the American League, 4 AL East teams making it. The Blue Jays get the 6th seed, and in the average is they have 83.33 wins by average, and the Astros and Rangers are tied at 83. So a very close race for that last wild card spot. But the Blue Jays narrowly finish as the 6th seed. The 3 division winners, the 1 seed Mariners, the 2 seed Yankees, and the 3 seed Tigers. I still think the Tigers have a chance at the 1 seed, a very real chance, especially if their division ends up being weaker than expected. So Blue Jays play Tigers in the wild card round, and then the Red Sox host the Orioles. What a fun interdivision battle that would be, where I have the Red Sox on the strength of their pitching staff. Even if I don't believe in it, I still think it's better pitching staff than the Orioles. Pitching matters in October. Give me the Red Sox to advance to face the Mariners, and the Tigers to beat the Blue Jays in advance to play the Yankees. I have the Yankees, who can compete with the Tigers pitching wise. They might be at a slight disadvantage, but their offense should be better. Give me the Yankees to beat the Tigers and the Mariners to beat the Red Sox in a thrilling, low scoring series. And even though I'm hard on the Mariners and I doubt their offense, right now, I think the American League is wide open. I think any of the 6 teams that make the playoffs could legitimately have reasoning and legitimately make a run to the World Series. So I really don't have a favorite here. I could make reasoning, I think, for all 6 of the teams I have in the playoffs right here. So even though I don't love the Mariners and I was harsh on their offense, and I still think that, I give the Mariners the nod to finally make it back to the World Series over the New York Yankees. One note that I do want to add, I really wanted to pick an AL East team. I don't know if I see it. They probably are the most likely because the AL East has been the last 2 seasons with 2 different teams, and the AL East is usually the best division. However, what I would also like to, or not however, but additionally, what I would like to point out is since 2018, every American League East team except the Orioles have made the World Series, and they've all played the Dodgers. In 2018, the Red Sox beat the Dodgers in the World Series. In 2020, the Rays lost to the Dodgers in Game 7 in the World Series. In 2024, the Yankees lost to the Dodgers in the World Series. And in 2026, the Blue Jays almost losing in Game 7 after having a lead, lost to the Dodgers as we remember it last year in the World Series. So the Orioles can complete the series. If the Orioles make it this year, then the Dodgers would have a chance to play all 5 American League East teams in the World Series. I think that's an interesting tidbit. Again, I don't have it happening, but I do think that would be funny if the Orioles make it for that reason. And now the National League bracket. Dodgers, shocker, would end up being the 1 seed with the averages, and the Braves would receive the other bye at 2. And then the wild card matchups would be interdivision matchups. The Cubs and the Brewers would be the 3-6, with the Cubs being the 3 seed. And then the Phillies and Mets, Philly versus New York, would be such a fun playoff series, so entertaining at the 4-5. I just realized that I just have the higher seeds winning, but it's because I think they're the better teams. The Mets and Phillies would be electric, but I give the Mets a slight edge, and they would move on to play the Dodgers. The Cubs and the Brewers, I think whoever the 6 seed is, as of right now, I might change my mind after the first month of the season, but right now, whoever the 6 seed in the National League is, I don't think they have a great chance against whoever the 3 seed ends up being. Give me the Cubs to beat the Brewers. And this is a fantastic Final Four in the National League. Again, I think the National League has more true World Series contenders. Like, I think they have more teams that are in that top 3, top 5, but they don't have a good bottom. Whereas the American League, I don't think has as many teams at the very top, but they don't have a lot of teams at the bottom. So they have a lot of teams in the middle that are looking to make that jump. And this National League Final Four would be incredible. Dodgers versus Mets. Give me the Dodgers. Braves versus Cubs. Give me the Braves, meaning the Dodgers and Braves meet in the NLCS. And I think the Braves, I think all of the baseball the Dodgers have played would catch up with them. I think the Braves, if they stay healthy, might be the second best team in the MLB. They have a good pitching staff. They have an incredible group of offensive and defensive position players. Give me the Braves to upset the Dodgers in the NLCS, leaving me with a World Series of the Seattle and Braves. I'm sure that that opinion will change not too long into the baseball season, but for now, that's what it is. And give me the Braves to win their second World Series of the decade over the Mariners, and what would be, I think, a plenty entertaining World Series with lots of star power. I didn't get to player awards today. Maybe I'll tweet them out, but put in the comments below who you think some of the MVP, Rookie of the Year, Cy Young, stuff like that. Put your prediction for the award winners in the comments. I think both Cy Youngs and both MVPs could be repeats again. Let me know who you think is the best team, who's going to win the World Series, who's going to play in the World Series, or let me know about individual teams. If you think there's a sleeper team I didn't talk about, or you think I have the divisions wrong, let me know your division winners. Let me know your sleeper teams, your overrated teams, all of that stuff in the comments below. Opening day is one of my favorite days, and it is finally here. Again, as I said in the beginning, sorry for getting this episode out much later. I've been having a lot of technical difficulties the last couple of days. Please, please, please like, comment, and subscribe. We got March Madness. We got opening day. Plenty of stuff to watch this weekend. Make sure you find a couch and watch some sports. Stay safe. Keep yourself safe. Keep your family safe. It's a crazy world. Peace out.